Hi, folks, and thank you for joining us on a new episode of Freewheeling. I am Siddharth Vinayak Partnkar, better known as Sid, to my guest today. And you know what? This is something that's gotten me really excited and happy because right from the time I started to do this show, actually, I've been trying to convince Ian to join us, and I'm very pleased to welcome onto the show this morning, actually, for him because he's in the UK, Ian Callum, CBE, and it's FRSE, if I get that right.
Oh, it's all sorts of funny things, yeah.
Great to see you, Ian. Welcome.
And you too, you too. It's been a while.
It has. We were just talking about how it's like almost a year since
Yeah,
we met, I think, and
yeah,
I think that the Jaguar Design Center opening was the last time, and of course you had already stepped away from Jaguar by then, but that's when we last met. So without boring too many people about that part, let me ask you straight away. The last few days, this whole lockdown. I mean, we have different protocols, I suppose, in the different places that we are in. But how's that been for you?
Well, initially, it's been going on for over 2 months now in many ways, and initially it's a bit of a shock to the system, not least of all because it's a very sad and difficult situation. And I think we're all just starting to fully realize and come to terms with the significance of it and the significance it will be in history. So the sadness around it is something which I felt quite deeply. But then on a personal view, you're into a new situation, which is a bit of a double whammy for me because I'd retired sort of, started my own business and I was going through a process of trying to kind of refine myself and redefine myself, and then suddenly confronted with this notion of space and emptiness, which I actually quite relished for a while. The first few weeks I enjoyed it because I could just sit and think and not be bothered too much by other things around me and around the world. And it was a nice sort of excuse to knuckle down mentally and try and reestablish a few of my thoughts. And then, of course, we'll talk about that in a little while. But then, of course, after a while, you get frustrated because, being a car lover, I wanted to go out and drive and couldn't, not initially anyway, except to go to the shops. Well, I have to admit, I took detours to the shop sometimes that lengthened the drive somewhat. But and then just finally, it feels now that things are relaxed a little bit more here in the UK, although we're not quite sure how relaxed they are. It really depends on what area you're in, but it's a little confusing now. So we're kind of starting to get back to some form of normality, but not 100%. So I
I
think there'll be a lot of readjustment for people to go back into normality,
Yeah,
frankly, because we've been in a different world, we've been in a different planet, really.
yeah, and something that none of us have ever experienced before. So there was no real sort of how to, there was no guidebook there. But
No,
but when you talk
no.
about going to the shops, I have some of the pictures that you've sent me. So I'm going to jump straight into that. Some very interesting modes of transport, I must say, that you seem to
I have a
have.
few.
I mean, let me start with this. Here's your sort of the daily driver, and then there's this van, which I want the whole story on, of course, and then there's also this old Ford. So yeah, let's start with the maybe we start with the van. What's the story on the van?
Well, I still drive a Jaguar, of course. I haven't sent you a picture of my F-Type, but that wasn't with me when we were down in Dorset, so that's where I was for a little while. And the Porsche is the one that's in the garage, but we'll talk about that later. The van, I just always wanted a Volkswagen van. It was one of these things, and where I live down in the south coast of England, the kind of the black van with the surfboard inside or on top is kind of standard item. It's a modern microbus, really. And I find with the van, it's just a very useful thing. And I just love the shape, the simplicity of them. And they're kind of classless. I like that. Although it's a nice van and it's got alloy wheels in it and it's going to have some, I bought some super suspension for it. But,
So it's a souped up van.
it's it will be customized. But I love it, and we use it to carry stuff. You make a lot of friends when you got a van.
Yeah, I'm sure. And the Ford Deuce, that's really interesting.
Well, I've
Nice little
always
hot
loved
rod.
American hot rods, yeah,
Yeah.
and this really is the one that I've been working towards. This car I've changed now 3 times. I've had it for probably 20 years. This is
Hmm.
the third iteration, probably its final iteration. And I always loved Ford American hot rods, and particularly for the 32B. It's just such a beautiful car. And when you get it into that proportion, that's not a standard proportion, obviously. It really takes on the realm of something really quite exciting. And, the way the silhouette fits around the wheels so perfectly, and, the overall shape of the car. So I love the simplicity of it. And I fell in love with hot rods when I was about 12 or 13 years old. And my brother Murray bought me some hot rod magazines that I'd never seen before. And I immediately fell in love with them because of the simplicity of them. And of course, I thought at that point, this is a way to do something that was quite rebellious that you knew grown-ups would not like. And also, you presumed it would be cheap. I tell you, it's not cheap.
And
effort and money into that thing, but it's now where it should be, and I drive that occasionally. It's a very quick car, by the way. It's over 400 horsepower.
I have to come see that one. That looks really interesting.
Driving.
I know, and I hope I can take you up on that soon. And okay, now we've got the Porsche on the screen. So what's the story here?
Well, that's the one I have. As I say, I've got a house in Dorset, and I go down there as often as I can. It's really almost my main home in a way, and that's the one that sits in my garage down there. And I've always wanted a 993, 911. It's been one of my favourite cars, and I found this one about 3 or 4 years ago. It's been tricked up, as you can see. It's a pseudo RSR. And it drives very well. It's got 3.8 engine. It's very raw. It's a track car, really. And it's just something I go out around the country roads of Dorset in, and it's just a very satisfying car to drive. It's not the most comfortable thing in the world, but
it's pretty direct,
for me,
right? Yeah.
For me, it's very direct, and it's just a great little thing to drive, and I take that out when I can, which is not very often, of course, at the moment.
Yeah.
So it's just a bit of fun.
But you mentioned that there's also the F-Type.
Yeah, I have an F-Type SVR convertible, and we've had some great weather over the last.
What color is it?
It's French blue. It's bright blue. It's called Ultimate.
Okay.
I think the bright blue one. Yeah. Of course.
That's
of course,
nice.
I introduced that colour into Jaguar, much to a lot of people's amazement when we did it first of all, when we did the XKRS.
XKRS, yeah.
We introduced it then, and it shocked a few people, and which I always like to surprise people with these things, and it proved to be a very popular colour for the car. So that's what I drive normally.
Okay. So that's your daily driver, actually, not the Porsche.
The driver's the F-Type SVR, yeah. And I've got a convertible because, the coupe is actually a better looking car, and it's the one I would choose if I were to keep a long-termer. But the convertible, you get the roof down, and given the traffic conditions these days, you've got to maximise the opportunity, and getting the roof down gives you a much more of a sensory experience in a car like that. The sound, the smells, and the sense of speed, even when you can't speed, of course. So that's why I enjoy that car so much.
What did you say the blue is called?
It's called Ultimate Blue, I think. It used to be called French Racing Blue, but that
I've
was
got
a
a picture
solid
of it finally, so it's on the screen now.
Okay, and it's a bright French blue. It's quite intense.
Oh, it looks fantastic. And you, I think, know of my blue bias.
Bright yellow calipers. So the bright yellow calipers with the blue fits really well.
All right. Well, I mean, the picture I have found has red calipers, but I can totally see what you're saying. The yellow would look really, really much nicer. Okay,
Bigger.
so say again.
And they're bigger.
That's even nicer.
Massive things, you just can't miss them.
Yeah. So maybe you can tweet us a picture of that car later on. The other stuff, I mean, besides getting out of the house and being able to drive. I, by the way, haven't driven for more than 60 days now, so it's frustrating. And you can imagine, you know me well enough to know how that must be doing a number on my mind. But you've also been sort of pottering about the house a little bit. You sent me a picture of a nicely mowed lawn, so I was very, very surprised by that.
Well, you have to start looking at other things in life, and it's a double, as I say, it's a bit of a double whammy, really. I'm kind of semi-retired, so I've got more time in my hands, and I've always wanted a nice lawn because I've never had the time to look after a garden, and I'm not a great gardener, but I'm kind of discovering the beauty of having a a very tidy, neat garden. So I thought I'd send you a picture of my lawn, which I'm quite proud of because it's got stripes in it.
Yeah. It's nice. Looks nice and lush too.
It's not a very
So
big garden, but it's, I just like the simplicity of it, and I've been looking at how to look after it better, and reading up about plants and things like that. So it has a relevance to the last few weeks a lot because I've been fortunate to spend a lot of time in the garden. So I'm taking a bit more notice of natural things. Bit of time, really.
So I thought I would also go on to your website for Callum Designs and sort of play out a little bit of that intro film because to me it really sort of defines what it is that you were setting out to do. So if you'll indulge me, I'm just going to play a
Sure.
little bit of that for our folks who are watching. And meanwhile, I should tell you there's lots of people who've already tuned in live, so you might want to just say hello to them as well.
Yep. Okay. Hello, everybody.
And you
How
have a
are
lot
you?
of fans here in India. I mean, even right from the time when we started interacting very consistently with you on the show, you remember we got you to sign books and we did all sorts of things, and you of course cooperated and sort of played along because, yeah, people, I think they just really love your work here and, yeah, lots of fans.
Well, I love India. You know that. I haven't been that many times, but I've been enough times to know what I like about it. And it means something to me in India. My both my parents lived in India many years ago. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
neither of them with us anymore. But so I have a natural affinity to the country. So yeah,
Yeah, okay.
and people.
That's something we are very happy about. But let me get to this video now and play that out for everyone
Go on.
if I can. All right, here we go.
It's all about learning, it's all about creating, it's all about finding something new. Good design is about discipline, good design is about editing and being absolutely focused on an end result. It's about working towards that one goal that will have positive added value to the observer or to the customer. Callum is going to be looking at designing many things, and to that end, we'll be working with other people outside of our own organisation, obviously. That's part of the excitement. Collaboration is a great way of creating new ideas.
The brands that Callum wants to work with are brands that have soul, that have stories to tell.
All right, so that was a little bit of the precursor of that video that I wanted to play out for everyone. And I think the part that, of course, when people were taken by surprise when you first announced that you're leaving Jaguar, but this is something I remember speaking with you about this. I think we were in Norway of all the places when we had first chatted about this. That you want to get out there and do a few other things as well. Tell us the motivation behind that, and also what kind of work you seek with Callum.
Well, the motivation is quite simple. I'm a designer first and foremost. I've always wanted to design things, and cars have been my passion, and I brought the two together, and they came together very naturally for me. And I went through a career, most of it a corporate career. I spent 10 years at TWR, which was much more of a freelance job, where I was a little bit more political freedom, let's say, and worked with many car companies as well at the time. But they were always cars, and I really felt this need to go and express myself and discover other things. And I think designers really want to go and find things and discover them and learn and do something with it and make a difference. And I felt that after 40 years with cars, and I would love to continue with cars, obviously, and I will continue with cars. But I just needed the opportunity to go and try other things that to see if I could really. The thing about design is it's not. I think a lot of designers see this as a point of expression where they want to get noticed. I'll be blunt about it. There are a few people out there who relish the notion of look what I've done. And this is great. And to be honest, in most cases, it's very good stuff, and they deserve the attention. But for me, design is a challenge that I enjoy, and I am probably my worst critic of my work. And so just doing stuff for corporate life and doing all the PR stuff and everything that goes with it was great. But I need to get back to the basics of being creative again on my terms, and without the pressure of corporate life, which to be honest wasn't that bad, but also the pressure of running a big team. I mean, I was looking after almost 400 people at any point, and the pressure of other people's opinions, which I do listen to, not least of all, of course, my bosses. And so I just wanted that sense of freedom to go back and try to see if I can still do it. I think if you're true to your word as a designer, you struggle with the notion of what you can and can't do. And I wanted to get back to the roots of it all again. Because I remember as a student, as a teenager, discovering what I can do and what I wanted to do. The frustration and the anguish, but then the joy of success. And I don't mean political success, I mean the success of actually creating something that people would enjoy. And I kind of missed some of that. And so I wanted to get back to discovering, if I could still do it, which is what I'm doing. And I don't know if I can still do it because I haven't really done very much yet, to be honest. But it's coming. It's coming. And to get back, yeah, go on.
No, I was just going to say from a timing point of view, you just came off of this massive high of the I-Pace becoming World Car of the Year. It, of course, also was the World Car Design of the Year. Just a couple of years before that, the F-Pace had won World Car Design of the Year as well. The F-Type had won World Car Design of the Year. So did you feel like, you sort of hit all the high notes you could have, as you mentioned, in that corporate structure or in that corporate life that you had?
Yeah, there's more. I'm sure if I was to stay at Jaguar, there's more in me for it. I had a really good young team in there as well, which really pushed me along and helped me to understand how things needed to change, which I was totally supportive and totally open to. But I felt personally I had done what I wanted to do, and that was to try and revive the notion of Jaguar as a design brand. And okay, it's a matter of opinion. Some people agree with it, some people don't. That's fine. But I feel I did my best. 20 years is enough to run a business like that. And I have to admit, when I received, on behalf of the design team, of course, let's forget that, received the awards, the World Car of the Year awards, and was it LA or New York? It was New York, wasn't it?
New York.
New York, yeah. I was drop the mic moment. I just wanted to kind of just go bang. That's it. I'm done. I'm out of here. And I couldn't, of course, because I had to wait till I made the official announcement. But I was so tempted to say, guys, I've done what I wanted. I'm off. But there are other cars that I worked on, of course, that you will see coming out over the next year or so, hopefully. And so there's still some stuff there in the wings.
Well, I mean, I know that some of that you can't talk about, obviously, because, like you said, it's still coming out. But the very first thing that you did go and do is the VC25. So you got to talk us through that, where the idea came from, and then, of course, the inspiration for what you actually ended up doing with the car.
Yeah, I bought this Aston Martin Vanquish because I had never owned a car that I designed.
Okay.
Which is a bizarre notion, really.
Yeah.
But of course, I've been very fortunate to design a lot of exotic cars, which are expensive. Now, I did design the original Ford Puma, of course, but I didn't buy one of these either. But never mind. So I bought this car and I looked at it, and typical me, I thought, well, there's lots of things with this car I don't like. I'll change them. So I started to come up with a plan to change details on it, which I was never happy with. And then it sort of slowly evolved with some of my business partners into something which we could actually turn into a real project. Then it fitted time-wise into me leaving the business. So it was a springboard for me to do something which I felt passionate about, to give the business some exposure, and really to express myself with this car in a way that I couldn't do before. So it was really a nice series of events that took place. And the reason I chose that was it's one of my favourite cars that I've designed, the Vanquish. It was one that had one design review, incidentally, when we designed it. Only one. Unique. And it really turned out spontaneous design. If you look at it, every line in it is very spontaneous. It's as it was drawn, as it happened. They didn't move really from that moment of being created, which has always been a philosophy of mine. But so I looked at that. I wanted to make it better. There was certain compromises made in the car when it was produced originally for a number of reasons. The budget wasn't huge, and we had to use certain things. And so we went out this car to produce a limited version of it, and I just detailed it from the front to the back in the way that I felt it deserved, including the stance, the wheels, and all the good things that a designer would want to do to a car. Not only that, but also the notion that I had learned a lot since doing the original one 25 years ago, and therefore I could apply some of that knowledge that I'd gained onto the car itself. It wasn't a project that I would suggest is the mainstay of what I want to do. It's a starting point. The other thing that I was always keen to do was to be involved in the making of things as well, not just the designing it and then giving it to somebody else to make. And the nice thing about this car is that we are building this car. So I'm seeing it from the very first sketch right through to the production of the car effectively, which just fascinates me because I like to see things made. I like to see how things evolve rather than hand them over to somebody else. And that's going to be the mainstay of a lot of work that we do, whether it be cars or whether it be furniture or whatever it might be. You know, I want to be involved in the making as well, because there's nothing more satisfactory than actually creating something physical. I think it's the most fantastic feeling. So VC25 is 25 versions of the revisit of my design from 25 years later. And it incorporates a lot of over 100 changes. And it's not just about the style and the interior, it's also about the engineering, the mechanics of the car. Our chief engineer, Adam Donfrancesco, has been heavily involved in the car, redeveloped the chassis, redeveloped the engine, the drivetrain, as well as a lot of the feasibility and the bodywork and the interior as well. So, you know, it's not just a styling exercise. This is very much a complete exercise in effectively what will feel like a new car. And another one of my objectives, of course, was to when it was finished, I felt the original shape was strong enough to carry forward, but with the detail changes of a modern car, and it sort of works.
I really like some of the details in the car as well. I mean, I don't think a lot of people perhaps know like we just had the picture with your coat that's I guess stitched on to the interior. You know, the one about chaos. That's got to be an interesting little detail. Order out of chaos.
Yeah, we've brought the still you know, chaos, order out of chaos, which has always been one of my kind of single one-liner pieces of philosophy, that design is about creating chaos, and then at the end of it you create some order for people to understand. If that makes any sense at all. I mean, I've got a lot of these little sayings, but that's one of my favorite ones. So but you know, I think design to me, and you know, and it's maybe an old-fashioned way of looking at it, I think anything you look at has to have a sense of order in it. Now, there are certain styles which don't do that. They're fragmented, and they have a kind of a spontaneity about them, which may be disturbing. And art is about that as well. That's fine, but I like the sense of order in the final product. Because then I don't have to explain it.
Yeah.
If you have to explain a design to somebody, I don't think you've probably done the right job.
I love the detail on the tailpipe as well. Made you look. I love that.
Oh, that was from one of the team. They came up with that. I think it was Alec, or one of our designers, came up with that. And you're not going to see it, of course, if you look underneath the car.
Yeah. No, it's a nice little detail. It's cheeky.
Yeah.
All right.
It's a fun car. It's great to drive, by the way. And so when you eventually get back into the UK, we'll take you for a spin in it.
I can't wait. I mean, that's incentive enough in any case to get there soon. But who knows when you know, travel will resume like it should. There's lots of people asking questions, and I know I shouldn't ignore them, so I'm going to quickly get to a couple of those. There's a question about I think, you know, the one that I had expected a lot of people would ask is I think it's from John Allen, who wanted to know about how one gets to become a car designer. What are the steps, or what are the ways to do it credibly?
My goodness. Well, when I started, it was difficult because nobody knew how. There was only one design school, and that was the Royal College in London, and of course there was the Art Centre in LA, but they were rather far and rather remote for me at the time. So I did industrial design in Glasgow. Thoroughly enjoyed it, and I say fundamentally I'm a designer first, and I love cars. So it's much more competitive now, much more competitive, and people know about it. Boys and girls. We need more girls in the industry as well. So my suggestion is you still try and get a degree of some kind in industrial design rather than purely automotive. I think that gives you a much broader balance of understanding of things. Bring automotive subject into your industrial design course. I'm sure most courses are flexible enough to let you do that. And if not, then insist on it, because transportation design is not just motor cars, it's buses, trains, planes, whatever. And so I would encourage people to do a course in industrial design, and then if they get a postgraduate, then go and do a postgraduate course in automotive or transport design. But really, that's the only way through now. It's very unlikely somebody with a portfolio will just walk straight out of school, excuse me, and into a job, because it's not just about the ability to communicate with drawings and renderings or indeed alias these days. It's also about the understanding of what you're dealing with, and it's a very complicated subject.
Yeah.
The motor car is quite an emotional subject, which kind of blinds people from the fact that it's actually a hugely complicated piece of kit. Yeah, it's probably the most complicated thing that you or I or anybody else will ever purchase.
Yeah.
Hugely complicated.
Yeah, and people think that the design aspect is possibly very easy when you're creative, right? But there's so much that goes into it, and especially now with regulations, and there's so many other requirements like efficiency, and now there's electrification. You actually had a lot of fun doing the I-Pace because it kind of threw some of those constraints out of the window, right?
It did, and also the nice thing is, I can say this now, is that because we were doing it a certain way, we had the skateboard platform. A lot of other people in the business didn't really know enough about it and how to define it. So it left the door open for us to define it as a design team, which is what design teams should do in car businesses. They shouldn't just be the product planners or the engineers. The designers should have a big say in defining exactly what the car is and what it should end up like. And because it's such a new notion, we kind of took control of its definition and ended up with the I-Pace, which to this day still looks relatively unique in terms of silhouette and the way it sits amongst its peers. But yeah, we had a lot of fun because with the skateboard platform, of course, it all happens below a certain level, and everything above that is kind of free range in many ways. Of course, you still have inverters and chargers and everything else, but where you put them is relatively flexible, because they're joined by wires rather than pieces of tubing or anything mechanical. So there's a bit of flexibility there. And as you look at various skateboards, these items, Tesla has them in different places, to say the Jaguar. So yeah, there are constraints, of course, but it was a certain amount of freedom that was offered up to us. And the fact we didn't have to put in a big engine, a gearbox, and an axle, with a differential and a drive shaft joining it all together. We didn't have to deal with all that. So the freedom above the axle became much more obvious, and we took the most of it. So
no, and I remember being very surprised by that car as well in many ways. So in terms of just everything that design sort of brought to the table, and it was no surprise then that it went on to win, of course, all of those awards. Still the only one to win 3 in one year.
Good. I will relish that.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty special one, that distinction, if you will. But even the other cars, I mean, when say that again.
It was a very good moment, I have to say, for all of us. I think I could almost hear the cheering back in the Midlands when we were picking the prizes up.
Yeah, no, I still remember the look on your face. I was lucky enough to be there as well. I still remember the look on your face, and I was very thrilled. By the way, can I now say this, that I was secretly very pleased to be able to present you the trophy for design, because in the past, I had been in the room when the F-Type had won for design, and it was Adrian Hallmark who collected on your behalf. And then when the F-Pace won, for design, and of course it won the World Car of the Year, you were in, I think, China, if I remember correctly. So
Yes, I was in
So
China.
Ralph had
Yes,
collected, Sir Ralph had collected on your behalf. So I was very happy that it was you who was there, and I could hand you the trophy.
well, I was very pleased too, Sid, and I was particularly pleased because we sat beside each other at the table, and you knew when we were going to get the design prize. I hadn't got a clue. You played a poker face on that one, I have to say, because I didn't think we would get the design
Oh no,
prize. I
but
thought
by
I
the
was
way, I
going
didn't
to get.
know. I didn't
Oh, you
know
didn't
because I
know?
hadn't
Okay,
opened the
because you
envelope
opened
yet.
it, don't you? Yes.
No, so I didn't know either.
Yeah, yeah. So I thought the Audi was going to get it, but hey, it turned out well, and when we got the hat trick, it was unbelievable. I
Yeah.
ran out of words, I think, in the end.
No, and I don't think anybody believed it when it was happening because
It's a
that
good
that kind
moment.
of thing doesn't usually happen. Where we'd had I think Mercedes winning three awards, but they were all for three different cars in three different categories. But the same car
Yeah,
winning that many
yeah.
awards was obviously something unusual. And it was only Jaguar I think who had done it, or Jaguar and Mazda who had done it in the past with the MX-5 and the F-Pace, where they won two each, but three was unheard of. So no, it's still special.
Good.
It is. But the car itself, it came after you'd already done the E-Pace and the F-Pace. Uh,
Mhm.
Going into that SUV territory, I remember the very first time when the notion of it started to come around, people were, obviously surprised. And what was that? What's the background to that in terms of how you approached it?
What, the I-Pace in particular?
No, the F-Pace, just doing
Yeah,
SUVs for
Pace,
for the
Pace,
Jaguar brand.
Pace. Um, well, I was always slightly reluctant to get into the SUV design ethos through my first 10 years at Jaguar because I felt we had other things to do. Oh, all right. Is that better? Okay. Right. Um, yeah, I felt we had other more important things to do actually than to SUVs. And it became apparent even to me that this is what the world wanted. So we embarked on the F Pace, and it was quite a difficult program for us. I have to say, both Julian and I scratched our heads over it because we by default were ending up with something quite square and chunky and squared off, and and the first efforts were looking very much like a Volvo. Actually, I was feeling very uncomfortable about that, and so I said we need to get a little bit more of the F type into it, and that's really kind of what influenced a lot of how the F pace evolved with a bit of curvature into it and a bit of drama in the silhouette and the screen line, and making more of the face, because one thing about SUVs is people like strong faces. So we kind of had to exaggerate everything on the grill and such like. But yeah, it was challenging. But I think when we got to the end result, and even when I see them now, they still look. The car's probably 5 years old now, I think. It still seems to be standing its own amongst its peers. So I'm still quite happy. But I know what the next one will look like, and that's going to be a very pretty car as well. So we'll see how long it lasts anyway. I I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it was due to be coming out this year, as has been mentioned, but I don't know what the plans are now. I don't ask anybody. Oh my goodness. Do you know what? I don't. I mean, apart from car design, um, auto and design is the one that we get regularly from Italy. That's always a good thing to look at. Books and car design. I can't think. And you probably won't find this, but if you want to learn how to draw cars, and this is going way back in the 50s and 60s, a guy called Frank Wooten, who had a series of little books called How to Draw Cars, How to Draw Aeroplanes. I don't know how many he did. And he was an ex-RAF pilot, I believe. And he had these wonderful little books, and I still have mine somewhere on how to draw cars from sketch form through to a full rendering, and they're done with pencil and charcoal. They're not magic marks in, but it teaches you about the very structure of how to create a drawing, and whether it's drawing cars, people, or houses, the principles are the same. But cars are particularly difficult things to draw. I've seen some of the best artists in the world struggle to draw cars. So that's where I learned how to draw, was reading his books, Frank Wooten. But if you find one, well, good luck to you. You might get one on eBay. But they're back, I think, in the 50s. But beyond that, I don't really know any car books as such on how to draw cars. I think the magazines, Auto and Design, the Italian magazine, is probably the best bet to see what other people are doing and be creative from that. Or the 993. Yeah. The 993 is a Porsche I would like to have worked on, absolutely. I mean, I love the 992, the new one. I think it's a very nice car. And I love the new Targa versions, although they're a bit Heath Robinson in the way they all kind of mechanically fold and everything. It's very complicated. But I really love these cars. Not all 911s were that successful, but the 993 for me is a favourite. And it was designed by a friend of mine, Tony Hatter, a Brit. So, you probably know Tony. And he was at college with my brother, actually. So I have a warmth towards that car for a number of reasons. But it's just such a lovely little car, and it's still small as well, which is what I like. Yeah, I do very much. You don't see many of them on the road because I haven't been outside much. But yeah, I do like it a lot. I think that design language that Michael Maher's doing is just really, really good, and it's still disciplined as a Porsche should be. It's got that sense of tightness about them, which is, I think, what German cars should look like. Yeah, yeah. Of course, my. um, uh, yeah, I before we actually decide to use the name, I did phone him up and said, "Look, do you mind if I use this name because it's your name too?" And he said it's also the name of a lot of hundred of other people as well. But yeah, so we'll call the next one Callum. Um, I My relationship with Murray is we're, first of all, we're best of friends. We're good friends. We both love cars. He's much more of a hands-on mechanic than I am. I mean, I love that stuff, but he really does get into the workshop and weld things with a welder and down to the brass and making stuff. So I admire him for that. We never talk about each other's work that much. Maybe a little bit of Mickey taking occasionally, but we don't really discuss what we're doing. Not out of any sense of obligation, but just because we got other things to talk about. We usually talk about what cars we're about to buy and what cars we'd like to buy. And I remember once I said I wanted a Buick Riviera, which in the UK would probably take up the whole width of the two lanes. But it's a lovely car. It's one of my favourite cars. And before I knew it, he'd bought one. He phoned me up smugly and said, look what I've got. Another funny story is I bought a Vauxhall Chevette once. So it's all about the cars we buy. That's what we talk about. He's got more than I've got. And I bought a Vauxhall Chevette HS. Now, may not mean very much to most people in India, but the Vauxhall Chevette HS at its time was a homologation rally car. I always liked it because it had a 2.3 engine in it. and it was kind of the competitor to the Ford Escort rally cars at the time. But I'd prefer the GM ones. So eventually, I finally bought one about 3 or 4 years ago, and I sent him a text message. Says, "Look what I just got," because he would know what the AHS was as well. He said, "That's very nice." It's silver. It's silver. Most were silver with red stripes. There were not very many made. In fact, they reckon there's only 25 of them left because they rusted. As most cars of that era in the UK did. However, I had a good one, and I sent him a picture of it and texted, "Look what I've just bought," expecting a little bit of praise. So he sent me a text back of the new Ford GT. He said, "Look what I've just bought." Yeah. But we never really discussed work. But it'd be nice to work with him again sometime. Yeah, absolutely, of course. We'll see. It's enormous, and it's probably one of the best cars that GM did. Um, Bill Mitchell was a big hero of mine. He was a GM chief designer during the 60s, and I had two car design heroes, Bill Mitchell and, of course, Giugiaro. And I met Giugiaro twice, incidentally. Once when I was a student, he gave me about 3 minutes. He was obviously very busy, and I was probably about 20 years old. And then I met him again in Paris last year as I received an award, and he came up and congratulated me for my work. And I'll tell you, that for me was quite a moment. It really was. I had my picture taken with them. I was so pleased. Bill Mitchell, on the other hand, he's obviously no longer with us. But if you really want to learn about the beauty of American car design in its absolute best way, look at this Bill Mitchell car of the 60s. They're just wonderful things. Okay, they may be out of context with what perhaps you're used to in India, or indeed we are in the UK at that time. But for the American culture, they were the right size, the right presence, and they were beautiful. They really were beautiful. Like the first Camaro, the Firebird, all these cars, the Corvette of that time, the Corvette C2, beautiful car. So there's a lot to learn from what he did. We may not have cars that size anymore, but we certainly could do with that elegance. Mm. Mm. Yeah, the first thing to state, though, is EV, electric vehicles, and autonomous. They're mutually exclusive. I mean, they're coming together about the same time, and yes, they will sit hand in hand in many cases. It's probably correct to say that most autonomous cars will probably be electric, but they're not there naturally together for that. It's about timing, really. I think the electric car is inevitable. I don't see many people driving petrol or gas driven or diesel driven cars beyond 20, 25 years from now, maybe even less. I think the turning point was in the next 5 years in most countries in the world. And the electric car is the way that we will move forward. I've absolutely no doubt about that. And I'm a great admirer, a great supporter of it. I've been involved in the development of two now. And they give you so many attributes that you just don't get out of a mechanical car. Of course, there are things missing. The noise is gone, and a lot of people miss that, especially if you drive an F-Type. But they do have other attributes of performance and torque that you just simply don't get in a mechanical car. And of course, they're clean. And if you have the correct infrastructure around you, they're actually very, very easy and very useful to use. And from a design point of view, I do believe in most cases you're going to get an advantage in package design over a mechanical car. So I think for designers, the electric car is something they should embrace and work with it, and work with engineering to see what the best layout of these cars is going to be. Where the batteries should be, and the sports car, where should the batteries be? They can't be on the floor because you sit too high, so they need to be somewhere else. And I think that understanding of package of batteries is something that designers should get to understand as soon as possible. Battery technology will improve dramatically over the next few years. I really believe that as well. The big question is in the electric cars is infrastructure. And I know in the UK, I had an I-Pace for a while. I got a little frustrated with infrastructure wasn't good enough. If I went to Scotland, it's 300 miles. It was occasionally challenging. But day by day or week by week, the infrastructure, certainly in this country, is getting better. And most countries around Europe is getting better. The US is sort of okay, and the coastal lines, coastal areas. So infrastructure is the one thing that really determines whether people are going to feel comfortable with electric cars or not. Nothing else. It's just the infrastructure. The autonomous car is something different. I don't think the autonomous car will be with us in great volumes in probably the time frame that a lot of people are perhaps saying. It's hugely complicated, especially from country to country. We may see it developing quicker in some countries because the infrastructure, again, will be suited to it than other countries. But it's a hugely complicated situation, both politically and physically. They will come. They're being developed. But to what extent, I think, is still a bit of an open question. But if you get into a fully autonomous car, then the question is it a car anymore? Is it just a module? Is it just another commodity that you get into, like a mobile bus stop? Yeah. And that's the big question. I think for petrol heads or car guys, there's a question as to whether that emotion will be taken away. But I always believe, at least the next 100 years, there'll always be an emotional contact with the motor car. And for that reason, people will continue to do performance cars that you can drive. I'm totally convinced by that. So do I. Oh my goodness. The ergonomics of a car has been so scientifically set up these days. There's only one or two locations for everything. Certainly steering wheels have fairly flexible means of position to suit people. And I change the position of my steering wheel quite regularly, depending on what I'm wearing or how I'm feeling or how I want to drive. But I prefer the steering wheel to be quite low. In actual fact, because of where I sit in the car, it's usually quite low, but the steering wheel even probably lower than it should be. I often crop the top of the dials on the dashboard, so I'm not quite sure when I hit that top speed too much. But never mind, that's another story. No, I like the steering wheel low, the gear lever obviously in the centre, at hand's reach. But these ergonomics are well sorted out. They don't happen randomly, believe you me. There's a lot of science to say where they should be for most percentile human beings. And the amount of adjustment in a car these days, a modern car, is quite extreme. Probably too extreme, but you just put it where you feel most comfortable. I'm not one for the hands straight out in the steering wheel, because you need flexibility. You need driven fast. So exactly, but yeah. Straight out. What I call the Italian racing driver look. Oh yes, yes.
I am told that I was not audible all this while. So I think people just saw me talking and they couldn't hear anything I was saying. But luckily, they can hear you. So, all my very intelligent quips have been lost on people. But I believe I'm back now. So, okay, I'm going to ask you another question about. So, I asked basically some of the questions that you guys have been asking, by the way. And that's what Ian has been very kindly answering. Okay, so apart from cars, we also heard you've been designing yachts and watches. This is a question from Gautam. Is that true?
Not yachts. I would like to design a yacht. I've designed a couple of boats. I did a boat for Jaguar, actually. If you remember, if you go onto the internet, you will find that. And I did a sort of 3-seater boat that we did for a PR exercise for the XF Sport Break. I have been approached to do a couple of yachts for people. I'm thinking about it, and I don't want to build anything too big and extreme, because you need to start off with something you feel you can cope with. But yachts and interiors are very much a part of the whole process of designing a motor car, so I see absolutely no issue with that whatsoever. I think it'd be quite exciting. Most yachts I look at, I don't think are particularly well designed, I'll be honest. There's a challenge. I think they're very fussy and very untidy looking. They seem to have random lines all over them, and I think people try too hard to make them look very dramatic without considering elegance. So that's a point of view I have on a lot of yachts. But there are some beautiful yachts out there, especially but sailing yachts. I mean, that sailing yachts is really about a technology which I don't fully understand. I'll leave that to the experts. But motor launches, I think, is something we could do. Watches, I'm doing some work with Bremont. I'm also doing some work with another company on a couple of watches, which will come to fruition perhaps later on.
You've done some watches in the past too.
I've worked with Bremont on watches, yes. We've done some classical watches for Bremont, which is a British watch company. And it's been good fun. And you learn about, the intricacies of it and the detailing. You go and watch, if you go and watch how watches are made, it's really quite an education. They're phenomenal things. The mechanics of them, the detailing of them just takes you to a whole new sphere of intricacy that you wouldn't find in a motor car. They're very, very fine. So we're working with Bremont on the BC25. We've designed a watch with them that sits in the center of the car, and it actually comes out. You can take it away with you. We did that first of all, of course, in CX75 with Bremont, and we've asked Bremont also to design the dials. Now they've designed them rather than me designing them, because I wanted their inclusion in the whole process of the BC25. So I'm working with them quite a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm doing some furniture as well, incidentally, for a company in Scotland. So I think once you've mastered the art of designing a car, you can probably turn your hand to most things. But you must remember that you have to learn about it, and you have to stretch yourself to get to a worthwhile answer. It's not a case of emulating or copying something.
All right, so I just pulled up one of the Jaguar watches that you did with Bremont. I remember we were at the ceremony. I think we were at the top of the World Trade Tower in New York, where you showed us those watches for the first time. So that was
right, yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. When I saw the watch, I just pulled up a picture of the internet right now, and I was like, hold on a second, I've seen that before, and so it triggered that memory. All right, so now that I'm audible again, apparently I was gone for quite a long time. There's lots of other people asking questions. What do you think about what Tata is doing? Is a nice question.
Well, I never comment on what other people are doing. I think what Tata are doing overall is a very good job on modernising their car business and the truck business, and I think they're doing it quite successfully. And I know the guys from Tata Design, because half of them are based in the UK as well, and I think they're doing an excellent job. I'm not going to get into details what I think about certain things, but on the whole, I think they're doing a very professional job, and I think they deserve to be very successful. Certainly in the design world. Of course, it takes more than design to give you commercial success, but that's another story. That's probably a much bigger story. And so, but I think, and the great thing, of course, is Mr. Tata himself is a great advocate of design, as you probably know. He's got a really good eye for what is right and what's not right, and with some of his guidance and encouragement, I'm sure the design team at Tata are having probably quite a good time at the moment.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. He's always, and you've seen that anyway firsthand, how involved he can get. So I remember how often he visited you.
And some, yeah, he does. We've had some great conversations together.
I still remember when he was ordering his F-Type convertible, and he wanted the fabric top to be a specific shade. And he was like, it has to be like that. He was almost childlike in, if I remember, it was red with a tan roof.
Yes, it was, and it was a special red as well, by the way. It was a unique red.
Yeah.
We had to develop that, and of course paint is a component, and it's not easy just to go and paint it any color. But But we went to the supplier, said we want this tan roof, and they kind of looked at us and said, well, we don't do that roof. So, well, we're going to have to do it. It took a bit of persuasion, but we got there in the end. That's a nice car he's got, actually.
It is nice. I mean, I think it's his childlike enthusiasm around those cars that makes it even more special, I think, in many ways.
No, and incidentally, he loves American cars too, which is always great conversation for us, because he spent a lot of his student years in the US, so he fell in love with those '60s cars I'm talking about. He knew them well, so we quite often had nice conversations about the American muscle car era, which just fell to the ground in many of our peers at JLR. They didn't know what we're talking about, which is a nice place to be.
Yeah, which is kind of fun. I was going to say, sometimes it's fun. All right, I don't want to quickly run out of time here and not go through a lot of stuff. I'm going to ask you one more question quickly from the ones we've got, and then I want to talk about some of your favorite designs that you've done. But what was the first either part or full design that you did? The first one. That was a question from Omnia.
My goodness. Well, the first full car I did was probably DB7 after I left Ford. And I did that literally on my own. Well, I had a guy called Neil Simpson with me doing the interior. Mm-hmm. And it taught me quite a big lesson. We'll talk about the philosophy of this stuff. I think it's quite important. What it taught me was that I was standing there looking at this with no team around me. I didn't have another 15 designers telling me it was rubbish or it was great or anything. And it taught me how to be very strong in your own self-judgment, and you had to be very self-critical and analyze what you're doing to the nth degree in order to move forward. And it was really a very, very good discipline for me. It was agonizing, but it certainly taught me a lot about how to look at your own work and criticize it. And you write things, you're a writer. It's the same thing. You have to look at what you've done and say, is this good enough? And I think a lot of designers, especially in their early years, are quite happy just to get the design out there and play with the clay and can get seduced by it all and think, that's it, I'm done, and they're nowhere near it. And to me, that was always a great lesson was DB7. Yeah, and I did a few things at Ford beforehand, but my first car was DB7.
And your favorite cars ever since then? I mean, what stands out for you?
Well, I have to say that I love the F-Type. It's relatively generic, and I always try to push myself hard to the next place afterwards. After I've done a car, and that's why the XJ is probably more radical than the XF when it came out. But I have to one car I'm deeply proud of, because it was driven by the design team, myself, and it was taking the Jaguar into a whole new category of car. And what's nice is nobody could categorize that car as well. Journalists said to me, well, what is it? I said, it's an I-Pace. Yeah, but what is it? And I love that notion. They couldn't pigeonhole it. And I don't like things being pigeonholed, so that really pulled. So I-Pace is my favorite. Of
the, the whole sort of design journey that happened right from the time the first XF came out, we started to see people sort of suddenly looking at Jaguar a little bit differently. I'll never forget being fascinated by the rotary dial, for example, the first time I drove the car, and then the grille, the iconic sort of treatment that you brought to what became very recognizable as Jaguar. I remember having this conversation with you on camera a couple of years ago, maybe, about, hey, why is it so important to maintain that identity? And you talked about how it was still a brand that was in many ways going out almost anew to so many people. Do you think you achieved that target, making it really recognizable?
I don't really know the answer to that. I think it was certainly it's more consistent. Mm-hmm. I'm a believer in consistency. I think you can evolve the face of a car company. That's very important to keep moving. And I'm sure Julian will do the same thing. But I think it's wrong to radically change the face of a car. And this is why the I-Pace has still got a recognizable front end to it, because everything else is different about it. And I think in today's world of branding, the face of the car is very, very important. It's important to evolve it, but I think that recognition however, there's a danger they all become very similar looking as well if you take them literally as they are. And it's always a challenge to designers: is do you make do you make each face the same so people recognize the brand, or do you change them as much as you can so you give each car its own identity? And that's always a dilemma. That's always and I'll be guilty of making probably the front end of our cars too similar sometimes, the XF and the XE. And the facelift of the XF is about to come out. It does look a little bit different from the XE now, so I'm glad to say that. But only so much you can do in a facelift. So yeah, I have a few issues of what I probably promoted in terms of allowing it to become too similar. But I think the face is important, but you have to try and give them each one a character. And that's why the E-Pace, we deliberately made it look different from the F-Pace.
Wasn't like a baby F-Pace, yeah.
Yeah.
Which surprised a lot of people.
Which one? Sorry?
That did surprise a lot of people, that it didn't look like a baby F-Pace.
Well, I'd kind of learned on XF and XE, I think, and I think Julian and I were very much aware of that perhaps they'd become too similar. And certainly Ralph had as well. Ralph was telling me off that it looked the same. Ralph's always telling me off, but there you go.
But that's not a bad thing, I suppose. Yeah, I was going to say that's probably just what he's supposed to do in any case.
Yeah. So, but the graphic of the face is very important. Did it work? I think it did work. I think it got back to consistency that Jaguar hadn't had in a long time. People remember the S-Type grille, they remember the E-Type grille, they remember the XJ Series 1 grille, but they were all different. And there was nothing, and Lyons was not a sentimentalist, contrary to a lot of people's beliefs. He was very much a man for moving on and making something different each time. Unfortunately, he fragmented the cars into their own individual brands, which kind of weakened the bigger picture of the brand, I think, in some ways.
All right. What about the work that you did at Aston Martin? I mean, we spoke about the VC25 and where that came from. Obviously, that in itself, the Vanquish, was special, but some of the other cars as well. I know you worked very closely with even Henrik at the time, but the cars that you did.
Yeah, I did the DB9. Wasn't Henrik, it was me.
Yeah, I was going to say that's one car that I'm not sure it's credited correctly.
Yeah, I didn't work closely with him at all, actually, if truth be known. He kind of stepped in and took over after I'd sort of done most of the work, but that's life.
Yeah.
The face of the Aston was quite interesting because it's got this sort of smirk. And I use that analogy kind of to the same as Sean Connery and James Bond and all that good stuff, And it's important for me that Aston face should look like it's got a little grin in it somewhere, not just miserable, And I think that's a very difficult thing to do, because if you get these lines wrong, it starts to look a bit like it's kind of dragging its chin in the ground. So the Aston grille is fascinating, and of course it derived, I don't know if you know the history about it. It derived from a vertical grille with the guy from Lagonda did the first production grills on the Lagonda with vertical with two round holes. And when the Aston came along, the same guy got involved and he put two rectangular holes at the side. Then eventually they all joined up, and that's where the story came from. The Aston work was good fun. DB7 was challenging. Vanquish was the most spontaneous car I've ever worked on. It happened in 15 weeks. We did that car. Nobody got involved except Tom Walkinshaw and Jack Nasser, who was then chairman of Ford. That was it. That's how to design a car. Two bosses and one design review. Job done. And the DB9 we did actually when I was at Jaguar. So the DB9 was actually designed in the Jaguar design studio, working. And we'd already done the small one, the Vantage, but it was a mid-engine car. The original one was mid-engine, and that then got put to one side while we did DB9. So it kind of worked that way. But it was good fun. I mean, it had a very deliberate design language, which was about structure. It was like a very formal suit in some ways. It had a structure to it, which was very matter of fact, but in a very beautiful, elegant way. Whereas the Jaguar was much more voluptuous. And that was the definition I had for the two brands while I was working on them. The Jaguar was much more fluid and voluptuous. And Aston should be much more structured and tailored. I use the word tailored a lot when designing the Astons.
But the fact that, at Ford, you got the chance to be able to actually, shape the design of both the brands. In many ways, what we saw coming out for years after that has maintained that sort of symphony, if you will. That's special. Not everybody gets to do that. And both big, iconic brands.
Yeah, it was an amazing opportunity because I was designing the Astons, and Jay Mays said, "Would you like to do the Jags?" And I said, "Okay, but only if you let me carry on with the Aston Martins as well." And so for a short while, for about 3 years, I ended up doing both brands. I don't think Dr. Betts was very happy about it, I have to say. He decided that it really wasn't working having two mistresses, as he described it. So I had to give one of them up, which is fine. My heart was in Jaguar, and it's a much bigger job, so that's the way it went. But it was hard work trying to keep them apart. I know when the cars came out, people thought they were very similar, but they were similar because of a similar type of cars. But if you see an XK now and you see a DB9, they do look quite different.
Oh yeah.
Within the realms of where they sit. But it's to try and. But yeah, you can do it. I think you can do it. I think you can put your mindset into a brand and focus on it, and then come out with something which is right for that brand.
We were looking, of course, at some of the pictures of these cars that, as you were talking about them, and it sort of takes me straight back to, I remember, the first time I saw the XK, the first time I saw the DB9 in the flesh, just standing there and just staring for a little while. I can't remember the year and the motor show, but yeah, it was something else, seeing them in the flesh for the first time. The pictures were already, getting us very excited anyway. And then, those two, for me, really stand out as well.
Yeah, I saw a DB9 in the street the other day. It just parked up, and they're old cars now, really. But I smiled. I looked at it. I thought that wasn't a bad job.
Yeah. No, not at all.
Maybe I should get one. I don't know. They're not very expensive anymore.
I was about to ask you. Does that mean you're getting one, and then doing something to it?
No, maybe no.
All right.
I'm not going to do DB9. No, it's fine. It's fine as it is.
All right, so I should try and wrap this up now, because I could keep and this, I think, that I can keep having the longest conversation with you.
I love speaking to you.
Yeah, I remember. I think there have been times when people have sort of come and reminded us that there are other things to do. Like the time I remember we sat at breakfast one day, and I think we went past brunch time. Let's just say. But having said that, in this time that you've had, I know you've told me that it's relatively easy these days to be able to carry on working from wherever you are. So, it hasn't brought work to a halt necessarily. But besides being able to take some of your cars out and, just maybe even reflecting on a few things, working from home and then also taking the right breaks and getting out to nature, what's that been like? I mean, you don't usually get that in your schedule.
No, and I've enjoyed the space. I've enjoyed the space metaphorically and physically. And I think the thing to understand is that, having done 40 years in the business, it's important for me to try and reinvent what I want to do and how I want to design things. I can't just continue doing what I was doing. The situation's different. I'm not in corporate life. Nobody's defining who I am or what I should. I was a director of design. That puts a lot of definition into your whole being. And so for me, it's very important now that I find a confidence to do what I want to do the way that I want to do it. But I've got to find out what that is. And it's not easy. There's a lot of angst in it. If you're trying to recreate design from within yourself, what it has to be, there's a lot of angst in trying to discover how you should move forward and what you should do to move forward. And I'm still going through that. And in some ways, this sort of moment of space has been very useful to me to try and work that out. I haven't got the answers yet, but I'm doing lots of little doodles and sketches and ideas. I'm kind of looking for different aesthetics and challenging myself and trying to be creative, but also trying to be curious as well. It's important that designers are always curious, and there's always this dilemma there where you you create your comfort zone, and then you do something different. You think, I don't like that, and then you ask yourself, why don't you like it? Because it's out of your comfort zone, or because it's bad? Then you have to start reappraising things.
Yeah.
And it's the same with anything new. Anything new has got to be appraised from a different point of view. So you have to do the same with your own work, and that's difficult. But that's something I'm determined to do, because I remember doing it to the same intensity probably 40 years ago as a student, and I want to get back to that again.
But
And I was listening to, you probably know I'm a great Bowie fan. I was listening to Bowie earlier on before you came on, and I was sort of doodling away and sketching.
do you want to show us what you were doing?
Hmm?
You want to show us what you were doing? I mean, if it's not professional.
I was drawing this. Where is it?
I'm sorry I broke your chain of thought. You were talking about what you were thinking. Oh, wow. Yeah.
So I was just trying to create a different sort of silhouette. It's a sports car, what do you expect? But I'm trying to get into this notion of just freeing up a little bit. But I listen to the music because not because the music itself inspired me. It takes me back to a point in time where I used to feel some hunger and a sense of optimism for the future, which sometimes is difficult when you get older.
Well, but you're also working. You're also working with different a new medium. You did a sculpture recently, I know.
Sorry, say again.
You did a sculpture recently, so I have that picture up on the screen of the sculpture. So what's the story there?
What sculpture was that? Oh, was that the cancer relief one?
Well, it's the it's the black one with the silver stripe. I'm guessing it's in.
Sorry, the E-type.
It's the E-type.
That was just a bit of fun I did a number of years ago. It was a pure version of the E-type because it deserves that sense of no wheels in it, just a shape, and I exaggerated the form and created this small sculpture which sits in my living room. And I thought, well, that's a lot of fun, and I put the aluminium through it to try and exaggerate the profile. So I've started to design another one based on the Corvette C2, which is one of my favourite cars. But again, it's sort of simplified and exaggerated and emphasising the movement more than anything else.
So when that's done, you've got to show that to us as well.
I will do. Once I've got it done,
and you've also been able to get out a little bit. I think you've had decent weather of late. So I know you sent me a picture of the beach, so that was nice.
It's not my personal beach. It's the one that's near my house.
We can pretend it's your personal beach.
I can't do. Well, there's nobody on it.
Yeah.
It was empty. Pretend for a moment it was my personal beach, but yeah, I go walks on that quite a lot. And it's a beautiful part of the UK, and the weather's been great. It's been, in the mid-20s, which is just a nice warmth. That's sensible, of course.
We're running pictures of that and the video that you sent me as well. So it does look nice and empty, I can tell you. Very relaxing.
Yeah, I like an empty beach. It's not empty anymore, I'm afraid. I think people have got the shackles are off. They're all moving back.
Yeah. Speaking of which, what comes next? What's the immediate thing that you're looking forward to as things open up?
Well, I want to get to what's next for us is we're going to get the Vanquish. And this is the biggest part of our job at the moment, is getting these cars built. And of course, I'm involved in the whole process of doing that. So we're building a third prototype, which will be a full running, functioning, and also a beauty car. The one so far wasn't a full. We had a running car and we had a beauty car, which is normally the way that you develop a car. So we're bringing it all together. We're producing a fully functioning, beautiful car, which you will see hopefully within the next month and a half or so, and it'll be quite stunning. And I'm looking forward to getting that on the road. With a different colour, different interior materials. It'll be very dramatic, and we'll get people driving it. We'll get people like yourself in the car driving it. I'm not sure we can ship it to India, but if you can get to the UK, I'll certainly promise you a drive in it. And then beyond that, I'm doing a couple of electric car projects, which obviously I can't talk too much about for clients. And I'm doing a chair for someone, which may be seen fairly soon, which
That's
is
interesting.
a kind of a luxurious, self-indulgent armchair. Really, there's nothing super intellectual about it, other than the fact that it just feels very stylish and something. Hopefully, somebody will want to have us build and put in their luxury home.
Well,
But
I'd
we'll
like to
see.
see it when it's done. And it's a bit of a cliched question, and I know you probably get asked this a lot, especially from the press. But there's also it's come from Harsh and a couple of others today as well. Uh, I know you don't like to comment on anybody else's work, but a brand that you think is doing good stuff right now on design, just a brand that's exciting.
Um, I, I like what Michael's doing at Porsche. I know he's got the whole Volkswagen, bag on his shoulders, which
Yeah,
can't be easy.
yeah,
And he's got to be very careful that he doesn't start blending them all two together. I think they've been guilty of that in the past. But from a Porsche point of view, he's certainly protected that brand well. I think he's doing a great job there. That's where I put most of my accolades for other designers.
and on
I think
Mars
Julian
brand.
Thompson's team, of course, are just as good. So I must
And you're
must
not
make that
biased at
quite
all.
clear.
Yeah, I was going to say that's not fair. You've got to give me a non-Jaguar answer. What about a Mars brand? Is there a Mars brand that excites you?
Mike Muller in Porsche is definitely probably one of my the guy I respect probably most of all. I think the guys at Kia are still doing a good job. I'm not quite sure what's happening there now, but um, and I have to say I think Murray's doing a pretty good job at Ford. But
Yeah, I was about to ask you that.
yeah, no, I think he is. I think Ford is a brand that has to appeal to a certain marketplace, and I think he's got it spot on now. They're not exotic cars up there; they're actually more difficult to design, but they have to appeal to a much bigger market and a much bigger audience, of course, at a price. I think what he's done there is bring a certain amount of excitement and exotica into the Ford range that you might see elsewhere. So I think he's done a great job.
Yeah. All right. Well, speaking of, say that again.
That's all I'm going to talk about other people.
No, I'm done talking about other people. In fact, I have to say I think I have to be done because I can't keep you, indefinitely long. We've gone well over an hour, which I just realized when I looked at the watch. So.
Most of your audience is probably left by now anyway. So.
No, you'll be surprised. Thankfully, we still have a few. I think the faithful few are still here. So thank you guys for doing, justice to our conversation. But it's always a pleasure. I mean, I think it's an often used line, but with you know this. I think that I've always looked forward to meeting with you, speaking with you.
Yeah.
It's always a very rewarding and fun experience.
Yeah. Oh, likewise. Likewise.
No, that's kind.
So
Thank you.
We'll meet up again physically sometime soon.
Yeah, I hope it happens this year. I mean, at this point, that's what we are all just saying. But when it happens, I of course look forward to it.
Yeah. All right. Well, you take care.
You too, and thank you for your time today.
All of you out there, it's a cliche. Keep safe, keep well, but I really mean it. Keep safe and keep well. And these are very demanding, tough times. So look after yourself and look after your families. It's going to change things. Definitely going to change things. So a bit more respect, I think.
Absolutely right. And with that, again, thank you for your time. It's been an absolutely great session today. So it was great seeing you.
All right. See you.
Please stay safe as well. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Ian Callum, who has completely revolutionized and changed the way people look at the design of especially the Jaguar brand. And then before that, all the work that he did at, every job that he has held in the automotive industry, whether it was Ford, whether it was Aston Martin, you've seen that little imprint that he has left on those brands, which is evident even today. And that's what I think is the true hallmark of a great designer. He is one of the greats. We are very, very lucky that he's kind of partial towards us here in India and has so much time for us. And I know that many of you are huge fans of his, and I've seen that over the years. Every time we have mentioned Ian Callum, you've always lit up, and many of you have gotten excited. Those shows have done really well on TV for us, and then today I'm thrilled that he was here on Freewheeling. So you got to react to this. You got to tell me how you liked the show. Any questions that you have, besides, of course, all the incessant questions that I have from Augustine here about Tata. Remember what Ian said, that he can't really comment too much about another brand. So he did speak about what's happening at Tata Motors, and also the patronage that came from Mr. Tata. I think that was really quite special, hearing him talking about that. I have, of course, heard him say that in the past too. And then you also got an insight into just some of the big career highs that he's had, what the work at Jaguar of late has meant, the winning, the fact that the I-Pace won so big at the World Car Awards, what designing the I-Pace was all about and how that was for him. And then what he's doing right now, things like the VC25. And then, yes, soon we shall even see that armchair that he was mentioning. So lots to still look forward to from Callum Designs. And Callum is going to do some automotive and non-automotive work. And so as things open up, we'll, I think, start to see even more of that. I'm thrilled that I have the standing offer to go and drive the VC25 the next time I'm in the UK. So now I will hope even more so that travel is possible again soon. So on that personal note, I want to thank all of you for watching as well, and for all your questions and interaction as always. Please react to what you've seen. You can reach me on Twitter at Sid Partankar, of course, as always, and or on Insta. And remember that the other thing we'd like to hear from you is who else you'd want to see on the show, because we've tried really hard now. We've gone to about 30 odd episodes, getting you a whole lot of people from the automotive industry, or even others, as you've seen, who have a little bit of an automotive passion. So please do give us your suggestions. There are some people who are already in the works, people we've reached out to, and some people where we're just trying to coordinate some dates. Remember that as things start to open up and you start to step out more and more, Super J says Gautam. So I think I've heard that before. And this is not the first time, of course, that I've spent time with Ian. It's the first time we've done it virtually, though. But yes, I think he's someone I always have time for. He's one of the special ones. And yes, going back to my train of thought, please stay safe. If you're stepping out for work or otherwise, please wear your seatbelts. Please wear your helmets if you're on a two-wheeler. And of course, what I will always do is leave you with a little bit of a teaser of what is coming up. And so, yes, our next episode of Freewheeling is what I will leave you with. In the meanwhile, if you have any comments for me, you've got about maybe 30 odd seconds to leave them here. Otherwise, as I said, please reach out to me on Twitter. With that, it's goodbye. Please stay safe. And here is our next guest, a quick look at who's coming up next on Freewheeling. Thank you. Goodbye.